Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a rivalry in the pharma world that's, well, it's more than just about drugs. It's a massive corporate battle.
Absolutely. We're talking billions of dollars moving around, potentially reshaping healthcare globally.
Yeah, we are tracking that race for dominance in the GLP-1 market. It's Eli Lilly, ticker LLY, against Novo Nordisk, NVO.
This is really the $1 trillion question, isn't it? And the answer is unfolding right now. You can see it in their earnings reports, their clinical trial data.
These two, they've basically got a lock on the biggest new drug class we've seen in, what, decades?
For sure. These are the drugs that manage blood sugar, lead to significant weight loss, and increasingly look like they can treat a whole range of chronic conditions.
So our mission today is to get past the stock market noise, cut through some pretty complex clinical stuff. We've pulled together the latest financials, competitive analysis, pipeline reports.
All to give you, the listener, a really clear picture of who's actually got the edge right now, where are the risks, maybe the hidden ones.
And maybe most importantly, why does the market seem to value these two giants so differently? It's quite striking.
Yeah, that's the core puzzle. So the big strategic question for you to think about is this. You got this enormous growth wave, right? This market could hit $150 billion, maybe more, by 2030.
Easily.
Is it big enough for both Lilly and Novo to just thrive together? Or is this heading towards a situation where one player really takes the lion's share down the road?
That's what we want to unpack. We'll compare them across, let's say, 5 key areas. Their foundations, financial muscle, how their products stack up, what's coming next in the pipeline, the operational risks, and yeah, that big valuation gap.
Sounds like a plan. Where should we start?
Let's go right back to the beginning. How did these two companies even get here? What are their foundations?
Okay, so Novo Nordisk, they have these incredibly deep roots in Denmark going back to the 1920s. Their whole origin story is tied up with insulin, making it widely available right after it was discovered.
And that focus, that legacy, it's still core to who they are today, isn't it?
Absolutely. They still supply something like over half the world's insulin. They are fundamentally an endocrinology company. It's in their DNA.
And their impact on Denmark itself is just hard to overstate. They're based in Bagsværd, just outside Copenhagen.
Yeah, and the company's market value isn't just big for Denmark, it's actually bigger than the entire country's GDP. Think about that.
One company driving, what, 70% of the country's exports?
70%. And they're expected to account for almost half of Denmark's total GDP growth just this year, in 2024.
That level of reliance on a single company, well, it's kind of scary, isn't it?
It is. It's unparalleled in the developed world. And it creates this huge systemic risk. Analysts have this term for it. They call it the Nokia moment concern.
Ah, right. The idea that if the golden goose suddenly stops laying eggs.
Exactly. Denmark's having this massive economic boom right now, purely off the back of Novo's success.
Right.
But if Novo were to stumble, maybe a competitor just leaps ahead, maybe there's a big regulatory hit or a key drug fails in trials.
The fallout for the whole Danish economy could be massive.
Yeah.
And fast.
Immediate and severe. That's a real macro risk just baked into their global operations.
But it's fascinating how their structure kind of insulates them from some of the day-to-day market craziness. Tell us about the Novo Nordisk Foundation.
Right, the foundation. It's a nonprofit, and it owns about 28% of the shares. But here's the key part. It controls over 77% of the voting rights.
How does that work?
They have this dual share system, A shares and B shares. The foundation holds the high-voting A shares. And this is critical. It gives them incredible stability. Management isn't constantly looking over its shoulder, worrying about activist investors or hitting quarterly numbers.
So they can think long-term, really long-term.
Decades, potentially. They can commit to massive R&D projects, huge capital spending like we're seeing now, without the market freaking out immediately.
But is there a downside to that kind of shield? Does it make them maybe a bit slow to react sometimes?
That's the potential trade-off, yeah. They're less susceptible to short-term market demands, for sure, but maybe also less responsive if the competitive landscape shifts really fast.
Like if Lilly comes out with something dramatically better.
Exactly. If a competitor innovates quickly in a specific area, say oral drugs or these new dual-action drugs, Novo might theoretically be a bit slower to pivot strategically compared to a company that lives and dies by its quarterly results. They prioritize that steady foundational progress.
Okay, so that's Novo. Deep roots, specialization, stability through the foundation. Now let's contrast that with Eli Lilly, founded way back in 1876, Indianapolis.
Yeah, Lilly's history is quite different. They've always been more about breadth, diversification across different areas.
Right. While Novo was homing in on diabetes, Lilly built this big portfolio covering oncology, immunology, neuroscience, a bit of everything.
That's been their traditional strength. But I mean, let's be clear. The reality today is that something like 65% of Lilly's strategic energy is intensely focused squarely on diabetes and obesity.
And it's paying off massively. Their recent numbers show that focus is working.
Oh, absolutely. Q2 2025 was incredibly strong. Revenue shot up 38% compared to last year, hit $15.56 billion.
And that growth is coming almost entirely from
Their GLP-1 drugs, Zepbound and Mounjaro, that franchise is just firing on all cylinders.
If we look back a bit longer term, say since 2015, their growth paths were actually pretty similar for a while, weren't they?
They were surprisingly close. Lilly's compounded annual growth rate, the KGR, was about 10.9%. They went from roughly $20 billion up to $53 billion.
And Novo
started a bit smaller, around $15.7 billion, grew to $49.3 billion. Their KGR was slightly lower, 8.8%. So similar trajectories overall.
But the key point is the recent divergence.
Exactly. Historically, Novo was the undisputed king of insulin. But Lilly's diversification, combined with, critically, getting their more effective GLP-1 GIP drug out there faster, well, it means Lilly's recent revenue growth is just blowing Novo's out of the water right now.
And that really sets the stage for the intense competition we're seeing today.
It absolutely does. It shifted the whole dynamic.
Okay, so we have the specialist incumbent, Novo, versus this surging, more diversified innovator, Lilly. Let's dig into how that looks in their recent financials and how efficient these massive operations actually are.
Right. The first half of 2025 really drove a wedge between them in terms of market perception. You can see it clearly just by looking at how they updated their financial forecasts, their guidance.
Lilly first. Their Q2 update was, well, pretty spectacular.
Exceptionally strong. They boosted their full-year revenue forecast by a solid $1.5 billion at the midpoint. So now they're expecting somewhere between $60 and $62 billion for the year.
And earnings followed suit?
Yep, non-GAAP earnings per share guidance also got a nice bump up to the $21.75 to $23 range. I mean, this is what hypergrowth looks like on paper. They are just absolutely crushing it thanks to that demand.
Okay, now contrast that with the news from Novo Nordisk around the same time.
Much more cautious. Their sales for the first half were still up, a respectable 18% if you adjust for currency swings. But then they did something surprising. They cut their forecast for the full year.
Cut it, even with drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy.
Yeah, they lowered the expected sales growth range down to 8-14% and operating profit growth down to 10-16%. Still growth, but a definite slowdown expected in the second half.
The market didn't like that cut, did it? Why did they say they had to lower expectations?
They were actually quite upfront about it, which was interesting. They pinned it on two main things. First, direct competitive losses.
Meaning Lilly's drugs are actually taking share.
Explicitly. They acknowledge that the superior results people are getting with Lilly's tirzepatide, Zepbound, and Mounjaro are causing them to lose ground in both the diabetes market and, importantly, the obesity market.
Wow, that's a direct hit. What was the second reason?
The compounding issue. This problem with unregulated copycat versions of their drugs being sold on the cheap in the U.S. It was supposed to be winding down as supply improved, but they said it's still a significant headwind, seemingly hurting them more than Lilly.
Okay, so top-line growth tells one story, but let's get into the mechanics. How efficiently are they running these businesses? Revenue per employee is an interesting metric for that.
It really is. It gives you a sense of how effectively they turn their workforce and capital into actual sales. And the difference is pretty stark.
Lilly comes in at
about $1,000 in revenue for every employee.
And Novo?
$667 per employee.
That's a big gap, over $300 per person. What does that signify?
It suggests Lilly's business model, maybe their automation, their R&D processes, perhaps their strategic focus, is just generating significantly more output per person right now. It's not about working harder, it's about the system's efficiency. And when you need to scale up massively like they both do, that efficiency is a huge strategic plus.
Makes sense. Okay, profitability, margins. Both are incredibly profitable companies.
Oh, fantastically profitable. But again, the trends are moving in opposite directions. Novo Nordisk has this amazing operating margin, 47.7%. Just incredible. But it's been ticking down slightly. They're facing cost pressures, maybe from scaling up, competition. Their gross margin, though, is stable around 85%. Very healthy.
And Lilly's margins?
Lilly's operating margin is a little lower, currently 43.0%. But the trend, It's like a rocket ship. Since Mounjaro and Zepbound really took off, their operating margin has exploded upwards from around 31.6% just a couple of years ago.
That's a huge jump.
It is. And importantly, their non-GAAP growth margin also hit 85% in the last quarter, matching Novo's.
Why look at the non-GAAP number there? What does that tell us?
Good question. Non-GAAP basically strips out things like acquisition costs, restructuring charges, unusual items. For Lilly, this is important right now because they've spent billions buying manufacturing capacity, like those Catalent sites.
Ah, so the non-GAAP shows the underlying profitability of just making and selling the drugs themselves.
Exactly. It shows that once you get past those big one-off investments, the core GLP-1 business is incredibly profitable due to strong pricing and relatively low production costs. That 85% gross margin is just phenomenal.
Which leads us nicely into how they're using all that cash. Capital allocation, return on invested capital, ROIC. How do they compare there?
Pretty closely on the current number, actually. Lilly's ROIC is 27.8%, and it's been trending upwards over the last decade. Novo Nordisk is right there at 27.6%.
But their trend is different.
Yes. Novo's ROIC, while still very high historically, they used to have sky-high returns, has been trending downward over the last decade.
And why is that? Is it linked to that spending we mentioned?
Directly. Novo is in the middle of this absolutely massive capital expenditure program. They're planning to spend DKK 65 billion, that's Danish kroner, just on CAPEX in 2025 alone.
65 billion kroner? What's that in dollars?
It's roughly 9.4 billion US dollars in 1 year. That is a colossal amount of spending.
And that's all going into building more factories, boosting production?
Primarily, yes. It's essential for them to fix the supply shortages that really hampered Wegovy's launch and allowed Lilly to gain ground. This huge spending is hitting their free cash flow right now, and it's dragging down that ROIC number because the investments haven't fully translated into new sales yet.
That kind of spending, $9.4 billion. It feels like a massive bet. Is it confidence or desperation?
It's probably a bit of both, but strategically it's necessary. They have to scale up production dramatically, otherwise they risk losing the capacity race to Lilly permanently, no matter how good their future drugs are.
So they're accepting short-term pain, lower margins, lower ROIC for long-term gain, basically securing their production base.
Precisely. And this is where that foundation ownership structure really matters. It allows management to make these huge, potentially painful short-term investments for the long haul without activist investors breathing down their necks demanding immediate returns.
Okay, fascinating financial picture. Lilly's got the hot hand, better efficiency trends. Novo's profitable, but playing defense, investing heavily to catch up on capacity. But this is pharma. Ultimately, it comes down to the drugs themselves. Let's shift to the product battleground.
Right. And the fundamental difference between their main drugs really explains why Lilly has the momentum right now.
Let's start with Novo's core platform, semaglutide. That's the active ingredient in Ozempic for diabetes and Wegovy for weight loss.
Correct. Semaglutide is what's called a GLP-1 receptor agonist. It mimics a natural gut hormone, GLP-1, which does a few things, slows down how quickly your stomach empties, makes you feel fuller, and helps regulate blood sugar. It was truly revolutionary when it came out.
It really changed the game. But then Lilly came along with tirzepatide. That's in Mounjaro and Zepbound. What's different about it?
Tirzepatide is the next evolution. It's a dual agonist. It hits the GLP-1 receptor, just like semaglutide, but also targets another receptor called GIP, which stands for glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide.
Okay, GLP-1 and GIP. Why is hitting both better?
Well, the GIP pathway seems to add extra benefits, potentially boosting energy expenditure and enhancing the metabolic effects beyond what GLP-1 does alone. The synergy between the two actions appears to lead to greater overall weight loss.
And the clinical trial data backs that up. The sources we looked at were pretty clear on this.
Very clear. Head-to-head, tirzepatide consistently shows superior weight loss compared to semaglutide. The advantage seems particularly noticeable for people aiming for really significant weight reduction, say more than 15% of their body weight. Lilly's drug outperforms semaglutide by around 20%, and hitting those higher targets.
Can you give us a concrete example from the trials?
Sure. One key study compared the highest doses. Tirzepatide 15 milligram lowered HbA1c, that long-term blood sugar marker, by about 2.3 points. Ozempic 1 milligram lowered it by 1.9 points. So better sugar control.
Okay, but the weight loss was the big story.
That was the headline, definitely. In that same study, tirzepatide led to an average weight loss of 12.4 kilograms. That's about 27 pounds. Ozempic, in the same trial, resulted in 6.2 kilograms, or about 14 pounds.
Wow, so tirzepatide achieved basically double the weight loss in that comparison.
Roughly double, yes. That undeniable efficacy gap is the single biggest reason Lilly has been able to grab market share so quickly and why Novo had to lower its guidance. Doctors and patients see those results.
So Lilly's currently winning on the injectable front, efficacy-wise. What's Novo's countermove? They can't just rely on semaglutide alone, surely.
No, they're definitely fighting back. Their main strategy is combination therapies. The leading candidate is called CagriSema.
CagriSema, what's in that?
It combines semaglutide, their existing GLP-1 drug, with a second compound called cagrilintide. Cagrilintide is an analog of another hormone called amylin, which also plays a role in feeling full and slowing digestion.
So hitting multiple pathways again, just like Lilly did with tirzepatide. How did CagriSema do in trials?
The phase 3 results were actually really impressive on the surface. It showed an average weight reduction of 22.7% over 68 weeks. That's a very significant amount of weight loss.
22.7% sounds amazing. Why did Novo's stock actually dip a bit when those results came out? That seems counterintuitive.
It really speaks volumes about how high expectations are in this field. The market, it prices things based on future potential and beating expectations, while 22.7% is clinically fantastic.
Well, it wasn't quite the home run people were hoping for.
Exactly. Analyst expectations, fueled by whispers, and maybe comparing it to Lilly's next big thing, retatrutide, that's a triple agonist, had crept up towards 25%. So 22.7%, while great, wasn't seen as definitively leapfrogging Lilly's pipeline. The market wanted a knockout punch to regain the clear efficacy crown, and it didn't quite deliver that.
So Novo is already looking beyond CagriSema too, trying to leapfrog themselves.
Yes, their next big hope is a drug called amycretin.
Amycretin, another combo.
It's actually a single molecule designed to hit two targets, the GLP-1 receptor and the amylin receptor. So a dual agonist like tirzepatide, but a different combination of targets.
How's that looking?
Early data for the injectable version looks very promising. It showed 22% weight loss in just 36 weeks. That's potentially faster and maybe as effective as CagriSema.
That sounds like a real contender.
It definitely could be. If that efficacy holds up in later trials, amycretin could be a serious challenger to Lilly. But the timeline is much longer. Novo's targeting getting it to market around 2030.
So the race continues. Both companies see that single or even dual action drugs might have a ceiling, and they're both pushing into more complex combinations to try and break past that, say, 25% weight loss barrier.
That's the cutting edge right now, pushing efficacy higher and higher through these multi-agonist approaches.
Okay, so combination injectables are one battleground, but maybe the more immediate and potentially much bigger fight is about convenience. It's the race to develop effective oral treatments, right? Pills instead of needles.
Absolutely. This is potentially the biggest near-term disruptor. Oral pills would be a massive deal for patients. No more weekly injections, which is a hurdle for a lot of people.
And huge for logistics, too, I imagine.
Enormous. You get rid of the need for refrigerated storage and shipping that whole complex cold chain. Pills are just much easier to distribute globally. This could open up the market to literally millions more people who either can't or won't do injections.
And Novo already has an oral GLP-1 on the market, don't they? Rybelsus.
They do. Rybelsus is oral semaglutide, but it's currently approved only for type 2 diabetes, and the weight loss seen with it is less dramatic than the injectables. The really big news for Novo is their higher dose version, sometimes called oral Wegovy.
What's the status of that?
They've submitted a 25 milligram daily pill version to the FDA, specifically for weight management. A decision is expected sometime in late 2025.
If that gets approved, that could be huge for them.
It could be a major comeback moment for Novo. It would likely be the first major oral GLP-1, specifically for obesity in the U.S., that could help them claw back some of the market share they've lost on the injectable side. It's a potential game changer.
But Lilly isn't standing still on the oral front either. They have Orforglipron. What's the latest there?
Right, Orforglipron is Lilly's once-daily oral GLP-1 pill. They recently released their phase 3 results from the Attain-1 study.
And how did it do?
It showed pretty compelling weight loss, an average of 12.4%, which translated to about 27 pounds over a year. Clinically, that's a solid result for a pill.
Okay, 12.4%. But you said solid, not spectacular. Did that result also underwhelm the market a bit, like CagriSema did for Novo?
It did, yeah. Again, it comes back to expectations. Lilly is priced for perfection, and the market hype had pushed expectations for Orforglipron closer to 15% weight loss, maybe even higher.
So 12.4%, while good, wasn't seen as a blowout win.
Exactly. It confirms that Orforglipron is a viable drug, but maybe the efficacy gap between the different oral options won't be as wide as the gap we saw between the first-generation injectables like Wegovy and Zepbound. The oral playing field might be more level.
And Novo pushed back a bit on how Lilly presented those results, didn't they, in terms of comparisons?
They did. Lilly had made some claims suggesting Orforglipron was superior to Novo's existing oral drug, the 14-milligram Rybelsus. Novo correctly pointed out that this comparison doesn't account for the higher 25-milligram and even 50-milligram doses of oral semaglutide that Novo's actually testing now and seeking approval for.
So the head-to-head comparison for the new high-dose oral drugs isn't really clear yet.
Not yet. We need to see the final data on Novo's higher doses. The race for the best oral treatment is still very much undecided.
Okay, beyond just making pills, both companies are looking to massively expand the potential market by proving these drugs work for other conditions, not just diabetes and weight loss.
This is where the long-term potential gets really exciting. They're trying to position these not just as weight loss drugs, but as fundamental metabolic health medicines. The potential list of new uses or indications is huge.
Let's look at Lilly's pipeline first. What else are they testing tirzepatide for?
Well, they've already shown it provides cardiovascular protection in a major trial called SURPASS-CVOT. That's a big deal, proving benefits beyond just blood sugar.
So good for the heart, too. What else?
They're actively studying tirzepatide for heart failure, specifically a type called HFpEF, also for liver disease, specifically MASLD, which used to be called fatty liver disease, and for chronic kidney disease, CKD.
Each of those conditions affects millions of people.
Millions. Each one represents a potential multi-billion-dollar market expansion for tirzepatide on its own.
And Lilly also has irons in other fires, right? Outside of GLP-1s.
Absolutely. That diversification is a key strength. They have donanemab, their Alzheimer's drug candidate, which could be enormous if successful. They also have Jaypirca in cancer treatment. So if something were to go wrong in the GLP-1 space, maybe intense price regulation, Lilly has other potential blockbusters to fall back on. Novo is much more reliant on this single area.
Makes sense. But Novo is also exploring new uses for semaglutide, expanding its reach.
Definitely. Ozempic already got its label expanded based on trials showing it reduces cardiovascular risk and slows kidney disease progression in people with type 2 diabetes. That's already happening.
What else are they looking at?
The list is long. They're researching semaglutide or related compounds for things like helping people quit smoking, reducing alcohol dependence, potentially Alzheimer's too, other liver conditions like MSH, and even obstructive sleep apnea, OSA.
Sleep apnea. How would it help with that?
Well, weight loss itself often improves sleep apnea, but there might be other mechanisms at play too related to inflammation or metabolic function. It's early days, but the potential is there.
So the big picture here is that this market isn't just about obesity anymore. It's morphing into cardiovascular health, kidney health, liver health, potentially much more.
Exactly. The total addressable market, the TAM, keeps getting bigger and bigger as they prove these drugs work for related conditions. It really elevates GLP-1s into foundational medicines, which is incredibly valuable for both companies long term.
Okay, the potential is obviously enormous, but the path forward isn't guaranteed. Both companies are facing some serious challenges right now. Let's talk about those headwinds. First up, the one that directly impacted Novo's guidance, this compounding pharmacy issue.
Yeah, this turned out to be a much bigger and more persistent problem than initially expected. When the official drugs, Wegovy and Mounjaro, were in short supply because demand was so high.
These other pharmacies stepped in.
Exactly. Compounding pharmacies started using loopholes to mix up their own versions of semaglutide and tirzepatide, usually selling them much cheaper online or through weight loss clinics.
But these aren't approved drugs, right? Are they safe?
That's the concern. They aren't subject to the same FDA oversight, quality control, or testing as the branded products. The ingredients might be different, the purity uncertain. But because they were available and cheaper during the shortages, demand for them exploded.
How big did this gray market get?
Sources estimate that at its peak, maybe 1 million people in the U.S. were using these compounded versions.
1 million people? That's huge.
It is. And obviously, every one of those sales is a lost sale for Lilly and Novo. It seems to have hit Novo harder, maybe because Wegovy had the more severe shortages earlier on. It was a key reason they cited for lowering their 2025 forecast.
I thought the FDA had cracked down on this. Weren't the shortages declared over?
Officially, yes. The FDA said the semaglutide shortage ended in February 2025 and told compounders to stop making these versions by May. Novo's also fighting them in court.
So the problem should be going away.
It should be declining, but the fact that Novo still highlighted it as a major issue impacting their H2 2025 guidance suggests it's been tougher to stamp out than expected. The demand for cheaper alternatives is just really strong.
Okay, headwind number 1, the compounding loophole.
Oh.
Headwind number 2 seems purely operational, just making enough of this stuff. Manufacturing capacity.
This became the biggest bottleneck for a while. Demand just completely outstripped supply, especially for Wegovy in 2022 and 2023. For a time, it didn't matter how good your drug was if you couldn't physically produce enough of it. Capacity became the moat.
And this is why Novo is spending that $9.4 billion on CAPEX this year.
Exactly. That massive DKK 65 billion investment is squarely aimed at resolving those production constraints once and for all. A really clever part of that strategy was buying those 3 fill-finish plants from Catalent.
Why were those specific acquisitions so important? Fill finish, that's the last step, right? Putting the drug in the pen.
Right. And it's often the trickiest, slowest part to scale up. You need highly specialized, sterile facilities, complex equipment. Building that from scratch takes years and huge investment. By buying existing, operational FDA-approved sites in Italy, Belgium, and Indiana.
They basically bought themselves time, jumped the queue.
Precisely. They bypassed years of construction and validation headaches. It was a fast-track way to significantly boost their capacity to fill those injector pens and hopefully meet demand going forward.
Lilly's been scaling up aggressively too, though.
Oh yeah. The numbers show they produced 1.6 times more doses of their incretin drugs in the first half of 2025 compared to the first half of 2024. So both companies recognize that manufacturing scale is absolutely critical to winning this race. It's an arms race in factory building. It really is.
Okay, but building factories, especially in the U.S., brings us to the next big risk area, pricing and policy pressure. These drugs are expensive.
They are, and the U.S. market is disproportionately important, especially for Novo Nordisk. About 70% of their total revenue comes from the U.S.
70%, that's huge concentration risk.
Massive. It makes them incredibly vulnerable if U.S. policy changes, particularly around drug pricing.
And even without policy changes, they already face price pressure in the U.S. system, right? Rebates and discounts.
Significant pressure.
Yep.
The list price you hear about is rarely what the manufacturer actually receives. After negotiations with pharmacy benefit managers and insurers, the net price for drugs like Ozempic can be 30%, 40%, sometimes even more, lower than the list price.
And then there's the political risk. We heard about President Trump proposing a potential 100% tariff on pharmaceuticals made outside the U.S.
Yes, that proposal, targeting drugs primarily manufactured abroad and imported, is slated to potentially start in October 2025. Given Novo's Danish roots and historical manufacturing base outside the U.S., this was seen as a direct threat.
But they're trying to mitigate that, building in the U.S.
Actively. That huge new plant they're building in Clayton, North Carolina is a prime example. By significantly increasing their U.S. manufacturing footprint, they aim to be shielded from such tariffs if they materialize. It's a strategic political hedge as much as a capacity expansion.
Okay, one last hurdle in this section. Getting insurance to actually cover these drugs, payer access.
Yeah.
We saw a report that CVS, a major PBM, might be favoring Novo's Wegovy on its standard plans.
That's potentially a really significant advantage for Novo Nordisk, even if Lilly's Zepbound shows better weight loss in trials. Payer decisions aren't just about which drug is best clinically.
What else do they consider?
Cost effectiveness is huge. They look at the net price after rebates, potential utilization, the overall budget impact. If Novo offers a slightly better deal or has a longer track record, a payer like CVS might give Wegovy preferred status on their formulary templates, meaning lower copays or fewer hurdles for patients compared to Zepbound.
So even with a slightly less effective drug, Novo could win on volume if they secure better insurance coverage.
It's absolutely possible. The battle for formulary placement is fierce and just as important as the clinical trials in determining real-world market share.
All right, this brings us to maybe the most puzzling part of the whole story. We've laid out how both Lilly and Novo are these dominant companies, riding this incredible growth wave in GLP-1s. Huge market, strong products.
Both making tons of money, great margins.
Yet when you look at how the stock market values them, they are worlds apart. There's this massive valuation disconnect.
It's the central paradox right now. You can see it clearly if you look at a common valuation metric like the forward price to earnings ratio, the PE ratio based on expected future earnings.
Okay, let's look at Lilly first. Where are they trading?
Lilly's trading at a forward PE of around 23. Now, that's actually down quite a bit from its peak, where it touched maybe 70 to 75 times earnings historically, but 23 is still Well, it's a growth multiple.
Meaning the market expects continued strong growth, it's pricing in success.
Exactly. A PE of 23 suggests the market expects near-flawless execution from Lilly. Continued pipeline success, smooth manufacturing scale-up, maintaining that growth trajectory. It's priced for near perfection.
Okay, now Novo Nordisk. What's their forward PE?
This is where it gets really striking. Novo is trading at a forward PE of just 12.
12. That's almost half of Lilly's multiple.
Almost half. And their recent trailing PE, based on past earnings, even dipped into the low teens, maybe 14x. This is way, way below Novo's own historical average PE, which has typically been closer to 35x over the last 5 years.
So on paper, Novo looks cheap. Really cheap.
Fundamentally, yes. It looks significantly undervalued compared to Lilly, and even compared to its own track record. It's almost like the market is pricing Novo for stagnation, or maybe even decline, despite the fact they're still growing sales and profits at double-digit rates.
One analysis we saw basically said Lilly costs 3 times as much as Novo for similar underlying drug economics.
That captures the essence of it. You're paying a huge premium for Lilly's perceived superiority and momentum right now.
If Novo's fundamentals are still strong, they're highly profitable, growing, why is the market valuing them so low? What are the big fears driving that 12x PE?
I think there are 3 main concerns baked into that low multiple. First, that specialization risk we talked about.
The one-trick pony fear?
Kind of. The market worries that if something goes wrong specifically with GLP-1s, maybe unexpected long-term side effects emerge, maybe regulation clamps down hard, or maybe Lilly's next drug, retatrutide, just completely blows semaglutide away. Novo doesn't have those diversified businesses like oncology or neuroscience to cushion the blow like Lilly does.
Okay, specialization risk. What's number 2?
Regulatory and pricing fears. Because they're so dominant, especially in their home country, and because GLP-1 pricing is such a hot political topic, the market worries about potential government intervention or price caps, especially in that critical U.S. market. Any hit there would hurt Novo disproportionately because of their 70% revenue concentration.
Right. And the third fear?
It goes back to that massive CAPEX spending. That DKK $65 billion, the $9.4 billion this year. It's necessary strategically, but it is pressuring your free cash flow in the short term. Investors who are hyper-focused on immediate cash generation might be avoiding the stock for now until those investments start paying off more clearly.
So summing it up, Lilly's stock price reflects optimism about its pipeline and execution. Novo's price reflects pessimism about specialization, regulation, and short-term cash flow pressures.
That's a good way to put it. Lilly is priced for blue skies, Novo is priced for potential headwinds.
Which naturally leads to very different conclusions from analysts about which stock is the better buy today.
It really splits the analysts. Those who focus purely on the numbers, the traditional value metrics, low PE, low EV/EBITDA, low price to cash flow, they overwhelmingly see Novo Nordisk as the clear winner.
They think the market has overreacted.
Massively. They see a 12x PE for a company that dominates half the world's insulin market and has a huge share of the hottest drug class as fundamentally illogical. They argue the discount provides a huge margin of safety. It's just too cheap to ignore.
But then you have the other camp.
The momentum and growth camp. They look at Lilly's superior drug efficacy right now with tirzepatide, their faster recent growth, that better operational efficiency metric we discussed.
The $1,000 revenue per employee versus $667.
Right. They argue that Lilly's current momentum and stronger near-term pipeline justify the higher valuation. They believe Lilly will continue to execute and grow into that multiple. They favor Lilly despite the price tag.
What about those intrinsic value calculations, trying to figure out what the companies are really worth based on future cash flows?
Those calculations often highlight the disconnect even more starkly. One detailed analysis we reviewed, even after adjusting Novo's forecast downward to be conservative, calculated Novo's intrinsic value at around $127 per share.
Compared to its current price, around $51.
Exactly. Huge upside implied. For Lilly, the same model calculated an intrinsic value of $1,235.
Versus its current price, around $625.
Right. So according to that specific analysis, both stocks actually look undervalued relative to their long-term potential, but the implied upside for Novo was significantly larger percentage-wise. Though forced to pick just one based on current competitive edge, that analyst leans slightly towards Lilly.
If the models suggest Novo is that undervalued, why isn't smart money just piling in and closing that gap? What catalyst is the market waiting for?
I think it's waiting for more certainty on 2 key fronts. First, Definitive proof that the compounding pharmacy issue is well and truly resolved and no longer a drag on sales.
Okay, clear the decks of that problem.
And second, more clarity on that next crucial leg of the race, the oral pills. Specifically, how does Novo's high-dose oral semaglutide stack up against Lilly's Orforglipron in the final phase 3 data?
A big win for Novo there could change the narrative.
Absolutely. If Novo's 25 milligram or 50 milligram oral pill shows really competitive efficacy, maybe even beats Orforglipron, and gets approved, you could see a massive re-rating of Novo's stock almost overnight. That PE gap could close significantly, maybe from 12x up towards 18x or 20x pretty quickly.
But until then, the uncertainty keeps the discount in place.
That seems to be the dynamic. The market wants proof before it pays up.
So we're left with Lilly, the high flyer, with the current best-in-class drug and a premium valuation, versus Novo Nordisk, the established giant, facing some headwinds but looking significantly undervalued, almost on sale.
#EverSac.
No, I think that sums up the core tension nicely. To recap the key takeaways, Lilly clearly has the upper hand right now in terms of drug efficacy with tirzepatide. They've got strong operational momentum, rising margins. They look like the winner today. But Novo Nordisk has that deep history, that specialization moat, massive scale investments coming online, and crucially, that very noticeable valuation discount. It implies the market is incredibly pessimistic about their future, maybe overly so.
It feels like this isn't a sprint, but more like a relay race, as you said earlier. Lilly definitely won the first leg, the injectable leg, quite decisively.
What determines who wins the next legs?
I think it comes down to three things. One, who wins the oral pill race? That late 2025 FDA decision for Novo's oral Wegovy is huge. Two, whose next-generation combination therapies prove superior? Is it Novo's CagriSema or maybe amycretin versus Lilly's triple agonist retatrutide?
And the third factor?
Just pure execution. Who navigates the incredibly complex manufacturing scale-up most effectively? Who handles the inevitable pricing pressures and policy negotiations best? It's operational blocking and tackling from here on out, alongside the science.
This constant evolution, the shift from just diabetes to obesity and now towards all these other related conditions, it really brings us to the final, maybe biggest question for you, the listener, to consider.
We know the obesity market alone could be $150 billion by 2030, maybe more. And only a tiny fraction of eligible people are actually being treated today. The potential is vast, but the ground is shifting under our feet.
If this whole GLP-1 story moves decisively beyond just weight loss, if it becomes primarily about treating heart failure, preventing kidney disease, maybe even tackling Alzheimer's or sleep apnea, these huge chronic disease burdens.
Which company is fundamentally better positioned to capture that multi-trillion-dollar long-term healthcare prize?
Is it Novo Nordisk, the deep specialist, laser-focused on metabolic disease for a century? Or is it the diversified innovator, Eli Lilly, with its existing strengths in R&D across cardiology, neuroscience, oncology?
Who wins when GLP-1s become foundational medicines for overall health, not just weight? That's the strategic inflection point that will likely define the next decade, and maybe the winner of this entire race.